Getting Christmas together in the poverty of London's East End in the early 1900s is recalled by Ted Harrison.
Christmas was very important. As soon as we finished one Christmas, we was working and saving up for the next one. And Mother used to do all the preparation. And she'd get we'd have to, just before Christmas, we'd have to wash the fairy lights. So we had glass jars, and they were all different colours, with a wire handle, but they had like what they call a farthing candle, small candle in. And they was put out in the yard to light the way to the toilet, because the toilet was at the end of the garden, you see. And when people went out there, they couldn't see the way in the bleeding dark, so they used to have these here fairy lights, so they light them up to the cars in.
For the rich, Christmas was also a special time. The 6th Marquis of Bath recalls the atmosphere at Longleat when he was a boy.
We used to have parties every year, and we looked forward to it enormously as children, I remember, because we were allowed to come down to dinner then, which in those days, of course, we had it up in the nursery. But at Christmas time, we came down and enjoyed it all. And we also had presents from the people who came to the party. There was one man I remember, his name was Aubrey Hugh Smith, and he used to bring down every year for the family to eat. Well, a tin that round and that deep of caviar. Now, caviar in those days was cheap. I don't suppose he spent more than £10 on that tin. Now, he would spend £120, I should think, or more. But it was great fun, really, Christmas, and we all looked forward to it enormously.
The kind of Christmas people looked forward to in 1910, when this film was made, we now call traditional. But it was then quite newly fashionable. The story of Christmas past is not so much about the survival of tradition as the creation of it. Since Victorian times, this kind of celebration has replaced much older customs. A few of these ancient winter rituals have been kept alive. This is the Mari Lwyd ceremony, which takes place in South Wales and has echoes of modern pantomime. Between Christmas and New Year, isolated farmsteads are visited by a party of revellers. After a ritual exchange, they're invited in with their mythical horse. In Somerset, the wassailing of apple trees to ensure their fertility in the coming year is still performed. It takes place with a good deal of revelry on the 17th of January, 12th night in the old calendar. On the 11th of January, which was New Year's Eve in the 18th century, the village of Burghead on the Moray Firth in Scotland performs the burning of the clavey. All these are pagan festivals derived from worship of spirits and the sun. The fact that the Christian Nativity Festival is also held in midwinter is no coincidence. The Reverend John Marshall of All Hallows Church, Ordsall, Nottinghamshire, explains.
We don't know with any certainty when Jesus Christ was born. Christmas is still observed at 2 different times of the year. Christians in the East keep it in January, and it has been observed in May. We think that perhaps on the scientific evidence, Jesus may have been born in October in 6 BC, but we can't be certain about that. What we do know is that round about the year 330, when Christianity became a permitted religion in the Roman Empire, Christians took over the existing winter solstice festival of the birthday of the sun. And the Christian interpretation of it was that with the coming of Christ, a new age had begun in the world. Evergreens had been considered by the pagans to be magical trees which kept their leaves when all the others were losing theirs. And so these were related by Christians to Jesus and to events in his life, the prickle of the holly to the crown of thorns and the red berry to his blood.
When England was still a rural country at the start of the 19th century, there was a long season of winter festivals which began around November the 1st. Festivals like Halloween, when village children begged for food, combined pagan and Christian elements. There was no national festival as such, but many local customs, feasting at Martinmas, and a variety of rituals associated with St. Clement's Day, St. Catherine's Day, and St. Andrew's Day. In many places, Christmas Day itself had not been a great occasion since the Puritans had banned celebrations in the 17th century. More important often was New Year, a day of greetings and giving presents, and Twelfth Night, when cakes were baked and kings and queens elected for a day. However, in the early 1800s, a new kind of celebration emerged which revived the importance of Christmas Day itself. The revival of Christmas was described by Charles Dickens in one of his early Sketches by Boz.
The Christmas family party is an annual gathering of all the accessible members of the family, young or old, rich or poor. A glorious game of blind man's buff concludes the evening.
Unlike earlier festivals, this is a family event for middle-class, church-going Victorians.
When the church party returns to lunch, Grandpapa produces a small sprig of mistletoe from his pocket and tempts the boys to kiss the girls under it.
The new family celebration happily combines religion and pagan ritual. The Christmas dinner with a large turkey is a grand affair, with a flaming pudding as a highlight. The middle classes are mimicking in a suburban setting the great Christmas feasts of the gentry. As the dinner concludes with wine and toasts and comic songs sung by Grandpapa, there's a recognizably modern Christmas here. The Dickensian family Christmas had borrowed rituals from village festivals and rolled the old season of revelry into 1 or 2 days. A changing concept of time was important in the creation of this condensed Christmas festival. The rhythm of the seasons governed people less and less as agricultural work gave way to a new industrial pace of life, controlled by machines. Factory workers on wages were not paid for holidays. Time was money, and the rural feast days were abandoned. Quite rapidly, the long winter season shrank in the early 19th century. Local customs died out, as Christmas Day was adopted as the popular holiday. The popularity of the family Christmas was first spread by propagandists, notably Charles Dickens. A Christmas Carol in which Scrooge is converted to the new spirit of the season, was a bestseller. It was an attack on poverty, and during his conversion by the spirits, Scrooge is haunted by the contrast between the celebrations of the well-to-do and that of the poor, like Bob Cratchit, his clerk. The thinly veiled message of the story is that everybody ought to be able to celebrate Christmas, like the middle classes. Scrooge, converted, provides the Cratchit's turkey. He himself joins his nephew's family party. The essence of the new Christmas, with its emphasis on charity, children and families, is in the Scrooge story. But the Victorian festival had yet to adopt appropriate rituals and customs. It was the now familiar figure of Santa Claus who gave rise to the most significant of the new customs. Preparing for his arrival became an essential part of the family Christmas. Joan Pringle of Alnwick, Northumberland.
Every Christmas Eve, we would hang up our stockings downstairs in the basement over a large fire, and then Mummy would bring down a chair. That was for Santa Claus to rest in, you see, because after all he'd worked hard. We would then have a piece of Christmas cake, a mince pie and a glass of wine, and we would put it on the hearth. And when Santa Claus came, you see, that was for his refreshments. In the morning, when we came downstairs full of excitement, there would be the empty plate with a few crumbs on and a big black thumb mark, and we knew that Santa Claus had gone.
Santa Claus first reported for duty in England around the 1870s. He replaced an older Father Christmas, a figure who represented the spirit of revelry, but who had nothing to do with presents or children. The distant ancestor of the new Santa was a real-life bishop, St. Nicholas, who lived in Turkey in the 4th century and became the patron saint of children. In Dutch legend, he arrived on the 5th of December to reward good children and chastise the bad, and he had a servant, Black Pete. In the 16th century, this legend was taken to New York, and in time, the modern Santa evolved. A reindeer-drawn sleigh was the invention of a poem written in 1822, and Santa was remodeled by artists in the late 19th century. It was the American Santa which in the 1870s was exported to Britain, where he appealed greatly to Victorians who worshipped the family and childhood. The habit of dressing up as Santa Claus took off in the 1890s and gave rise to a host of local rituals. A mysterious Santa sent the children scurrying to bed on Christmas Eve in the Dorset village of Sandford Orcus in the interwar years.
Children, in the time you were in bed, I'll come back in 2 minutes, and if you're not up there then, you won't have anything in your stocking. Oh. Oh.
Here, as in many other places, Santa was a woman, Claire Hart.
My Father Christmas days started when my daughter was about 2 years of age, and I decided I'd be Father Christmas. I dyed a blanket and trimmed it with cotton wool, filled a sack with paper and started. And I thought, well, it was a great pity not to let other children share Father Christmas. So off I went on my bicycle through the village and called where there were children, you know, and said in a very gruff voice, you know, if you children don't soon go on to bed, you won't have anything when I come back again. And of course, the children scattered. I mean, they immediately went off to bed.
The Christmas tree ritual had arrived a little earlier than Santa. It was a luxury for the wealthy. Jack Gosney.
I remember over 70 years ago, I was a young footman at Sherborne Castle. I used to help decorate the tree, arrange it satisfactorily. It sometimes was a bigger tree than this. Arrange the presents at the foot of the tree, which were mainly for the staff. And then one of my most important jobs was to walk around the tree with this sponge, wet sponge, on the top of the pole, and as the candles burnt down, I used to put them out safely with the wet sponge, thereby doing away with any risk of fire, which was an ever-present hazard in a place like Sherborne Castle.
It was German immigrants who first brought the Christmas tree ritual to England. Hanoverian royalty had them in the 18th century, and Prince Albert popularized them in the 1840s. The tree, like Santa, appealed to Victorians who made Christmas more and more a children's festival. The Christmas cracker was invented in the 1840s by a confectioner, Tom Smith. The spark in a log fire inspired this brilliant device, which was immediately successful. When paper hats and trinkets were enclosed in crackers, they provided the perfect little package of pagan ritual for the family table. Mass-produced fire and funny hats. All the familiar trappings of a traditional Christmas had been adopted by the Edwardian period. Old customs had been borrowed from other festival days and new rituals adopted. Santa, the tree, the sending of Christmas cards, the family gathering, and the pulling of crackers. But in the early 1900s, only the well-to-do could celebrate in this elaborate way. At Christmas, middle-class homes and grand houses like Longleat were run by servants. The 43 staff here couldn't join their own families for Christmas and had to amuse themselves as best they could in their free time.
Of course, the staff had a very good time, as I said, the dancing and had presents and everything, and they had great fun. I remember upstairs, I slept on the second floor, then the staff slept above me. And during the evenings, I used to hear running about going on up there. I thought it was almost ghosts, but I later discovered it was a footman chasing the housemaid. I mean, all that went on just as much as it might today. They really had a good time. On the other hand, I suppose they weren't given so much liberty. They didn't work a 5-day week. They probably had to work a 6 or some of them even 7 days as required. And on Christmas time, I can't remember, but I was young, of course, I can't remember any of the staff ever being allowed to go home to see their parents or their family.
Christmas was hard work for Jack Gosney.
On Christmas morning, we started off the same as any other morning. And we were kept busy. We didn't think a lot about Christmas. My job was to see to the fires, working on to tea time, the Christmas tree, giving of presents, and then the dinner, washing up for the dinner, seeing the silver safely stowed away, and clearing the table, which often used to be hanging about sometimes till 9, because if there was any gentleman there, and they used to circulate the port, and we were still waiting just to put the finishing touch, and then washing up and seeing everything, placing the candles for them to go to bed with, and lucky if we got to bed by 10 to half past. So that was a Christmas come and gone.
In the big houses, there were at least perks for the servants.
My mother always bought presents for me, and on Christmas Eve, she used to ask all the servants into what's called the chapel passage. She didn't have them in her room. I suppose that was considered a bit too near the knuckle. I don't know why. But she didn't have them in the drawing room. She had them in the passage. And there all the ladies received a piece of cloth, or as you might say, suitable to make a dress for themselves. And the men received something for their underwear of some sort, boots or something like that. I remember she sat in this chair, and each servant was called by name by the house steward. She came up and presented the present, which they enjoyed very much.
Betty Ward was a maid in a middle-class family.
Well, I was in service in London with a lovely family. And of course, Christmas came around, but I never thought of it as Christmas because I was away from home. But I just took things normal, did my work in the morning, cooked the Christmas dinner, and went to bed at the normal time. And then I'd been asleep for quite a while, I think, and then I woke up, and I thought, there's a knock on the door. And I just said, come in. And it was the master and the mistress and the daughter, with a glass of sherry and a piece of cake. And we drank the sherry and wished one another a Merry Christmas. And they said, these are for you, Betty. And there was one from the dog. Oh, it was lovely. Only a box of crackers, but it was lovely to me. And it had on, to Betty from baby with love, and all the paw marks right along. I can still see those paw marks, you know. I can still see them, even to this day, for all so long ago.
It was tougher for servants down the social scale, as Rose Ashton of Barrow remembers.
I went to the farm, and the first Christmas, they were very nice people and very kind to me, and they were very good. We had our Christmas breakfast, and we had our Christmas dinner. And then I washed up, and after I finished washing up, and I came in, and she said, have you finished, Rose? And I said, yes, madam. She said, well, there's a pile of papers there, and there's a ball of string, and there's a big needle. She said, I want you to go down to the paddock. Now, the paddock was the toilet, and it was a long way through the farmyard. And I sat there, threading these bits of paper with the scissors, cutting little squares. Then she came to me, and she said, have you finished, Rose? And I said, yes. I said, well, come on, she said, and have your tea. So she came on my tea. But they were very nice and very kind to me. But I cried buckets of tears. I was crying all the while I was cutting these papers, thinking about my mum and them at Christmas and me sitting there.
Lowly servants at least had the privilege of enjoying at their employer's expense a proper Christmas dinner. Before 1914, West Country villages had to improvise their Christmas dinners, as Gladys Withers remembers.
My father was the village baker, very popular man in the village, and he started baking in 1883 at a little village called Charlton Adam. He only stopped baking on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, but the ovens had to be kept going, otherwise it would take such a lot of time on the day following Boxing Day to get the heat up. So he would keep the ovens going, and the cottagers would bring in their dinners for him to cook. There would be rabbits with their heads skewered up so that they were sitting up on a meat tin. And there would be pigeons, and they would be all nicely trussed up. But I think the greatest delicacy that the cottagers would make would be a blackbird pie. It was only the breasts and the legs that were used for the pies because the rest of the blackbird would be very bitter. But the breasts were cut off and the legs were cleaned and the feet were cleaned. The breast would be laid in the pie with gravy added, and the feet would protrude up through the pastry in a little bunch. And that would be a great delicacy, really.
Before the Great War, Christmas was a simple affair for the great majority. Many who fought in the war had no memory of a great Dickensian feast. But they did by then recognize Christmas as the great winter festival, as did their enemy, the Germans in the trenches. Christmas 1914 on the Western Front is a vivid memory for Graham Williams.
It had been pouring with rain for days beforehand and found the trench knee-deep in water. And, the only dry spot was the fire step which the sentry stood on to keep a lookout and to fire over if necessary. And prospects over Christmas didn't look any too good. My turn of duty that night on the sentry go on the fire step was from 10 to 12. As I was standing there gazing out there, I thought what a different Christmas this was going to be from any I'd ever had before, and thought that my family at home had been putting up their Christmas decorations, and which they always did after supper on Christmas Eve, and my father would be thinking about making his rum punch. Instead of enjoying that, here I am standing in the middle of this wet, uninspiring Flanders landscape, standing there. Then at 11 o'clock precisely, which was midnight by German time, I suddenly saw lights appear in front of me all along the German trench. I was wondering what on earth all this was, and I woke the other chaps who were sleeping there to come and look. All the other sentries did the same, and everybody came there. We were standing there looking at it, wondering what was happening. The Germans started singing, "Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht."
The trees had been issued to German troops to boost morale, but their ghostly lights signaled the start of an unofficial truce in the trenches. At the time of the Great War, Christmas had become a national festival throughout most of Britain. In Scotland, however, it wasn't a public holiday, and even in the 1920s, Christmas was just beginning to catch on in remote areas like Perthshire, as Henry Kinnaird recalls.
We went to school on Christmas Day just because it was the normal thing, with all the work going on as usual in the country and the farms and towns and shops being open and that. Mother drove us down in the pony and trap, and we didn't get lessons. We got the usual scripture reading and a prayer and then carols. Well, it was really after the third Christmas that I was at school. Some of the farmers' children were kept off school on Christmas Day, and the headmistress was a bit annoyed at getting at this happening, but that was the end of the being at school on Christmas.
Even in sophisticated Edinburgh, some families regarded Christmas as an English festival and rejected it. Charles McEwan.
Well, my grandmother, dominant figure, she did not hold Christmas. She held on to the tradition of the New Year, and presents, etc., were exchanged at that time. I don't know why she had this belief, but when I asked her, some years later, possibly about 5 or 6, I asked her, why do we not hold Christmas, Grandma, and just this New Year? And she came back with, and I never understood it, we're no heathens, laddie.
Newsreels like this one showing London's Christmas lights in the 20s presented images of how Christmas ought to be to a nationwide audience. The rise of the modern Christmas has gone hand in hand with the spread of mass communications.
Look at the delighted faces of the young guests at the HAC Christmas party, which the Lord Mayor attends.
The pictures showing children at a charity dinner present Christmas as a festival of national togetherness and unity. The same message came from radio between the wars.
Through one of the marvels of modern science, I am enabled this Christmas Day to speak to all my peoples throughout the empire.
King George V broadcast the first ever royal Christmas message in 1932. It became part of the family celebration. Joan Pringle.
We gathered around and listened to his speech very intently. I don't really remember much about what he said, but I know we listened with bated breath because he was the king. And then afterwards we all stood up and sang God Save the King and toasted the royal family.
The messages were broadcast at 3 p.m. to get maximum coverage on the BBC's new Empire service. They reached expatriates who had taken the festival all over the world. Christmas in Pune, India in the 20s is recalled by Mary Lenehan.
You see, we had never seen snow. And from somewhere, someone always produced a little bit of mistletoe. And we had in our compound a flame of the forest tree, huge, which in winter didn't have so much flame of the forest. And we hung Chinese lanterns on that tree. It was really beautiful, and all these were lit. And in an annual doing up of the whole place, the walls were whitewashed, the gates were whitewashed, and it came up in a lawn like that to a front porch and a back door there. And all this was clean and got ready. And we in our ignorance used to think it was Father Christmas coming.
Christmas had become a festival not only of national, but of imperial unity.
And all the peoples of this realm and empire are bound to me and to one another by the spirit of one great family.
So to the oldest country of the world. In Cairo, camels in the sand, not reindeer in the snow, and pyramids instead of church towers.
Well-to-do colonials in an exotic setting were then enjoying a more traditional Christmas than the majority of people back home.
Add to the fun of giving and to the associations of childhood the fact that Christmas is the festival of home. And you have three of the things about Christmas which explain its never-failing appeal.
The cosy images of the newsreels nearly always provided a very idealized picture of how Christmas was really celebrated in Britain between the wars.
And here we leave him, on Father's knee, dreaming exciting dreams of tomorrow and enjoying his bedtime story, which may perhaps concern the identity of this venerable and popular old gentleman.
The idealized images of the newsreels ran ahead of reality, and in doing so, unintentionally encouraged the commercialization of Christmas. Christmas as the festival of giving had charitable overtones in Victorian times. Between the wars, this same spirit oiled the wheels of industry which geared up to manufacture for Christmas. Three-quarters of all toys were sold at Christmas. Few children were given presents at other times of the year. The modern Christmas was beginning to be an instrument of mass production.
Come on, Dad, I'm fed up. James, come on. No, my son, I want to see them go round.
A Hornby train set was the classic present for a boy. John Kitchen remembers how exciting it was to get one.
Grandfather at that time was the general manager of the local cooperative society, and I well remember going down to the shop and seeing Hornby trains running in the window. This train I got on Christmas Day in 1926. And the thrill of it I can still feel inside me. The train set cost 60 shillings, which is £3 in modern money. A tremendous amount of money in those days because it represented at least 2 weeks' wages. Few boys had the fortune to own a train set of this quality.
Hornby did make cheaper trains, and by the mid-1930s, when this early colour film was taken, the commercialization of Christmas had become the most powerful force in spreading the festival. Then the commercialization of Christmas was halted abruptly by the war. However, in wartime, Christmas became more important as a festival which symbolized national unity. It featured in propaganda, which showed rosy images of the past and held out hope for a brighter future.
Yes, Christmas is here again. Christmas 1943. I haven't been seeing much of you lately, have I? This blinking war's upset a lot of things. Never mind. God love it, do you remember the good times we used to have? Boy, shall we go crackers when this blinking war's over? I'll say we shall. But still, never mind. We may not be cooking a turkey this year, but we do know we've cooked it for as goose.
For some, like evacuee children sent to better-off homes from London slums, the war provided a first taste of a real Christmas. Ivy King experienced this.
When I was evacuated, the couple I went to were a middle-aged couple that had no children of their own. And when it was Christmas time, they said to me, if you go in the front room, you'll find a surprise. And under the armchair was this big white box with a beautiful china doll in it. And I really thought I was in Wonderland because I'd never seen anything like it before. And Christmas was entirely different. We had, for Christmas dinner, we had chicken, which I'd never seen before either. And, of course, mince pies, Christmas pudding, all things like that, you know, that was so different to me. It's nothing that I'd experienced before like that. And then in the village hall, the party was put on for the evacuees, mainly the evacuees, and there was all different things there, a Christmas tree, Father Christmas. It never visited me at home.
Did Santa Claus eat his reindeer for his Christmas dinner? Why worry? His arrival by tank gives the kiddies a real wartime surprise.
Santa Claus was transformed into a figure of defiance and turned up everywhere there were British or American troops. For those in the forces who hardly knew Christmas, like the Scots, it was a time of conversion. Betty and Charles McEwen were among those who were won over.
There, we were really in with an awful lot of English, and we found out that they were an awfully nice bunch. And when it came to Christmas, they used to say, leave it to us, John.
It was the same when I was in the Range. These parties, well, one particular party we had where the officers, that rank meant nothing at all. I mean, they were just all drop Damson's parents. And it made quite a difference. And we just thought at the time it's a pity that Christmas just couldn't carry on, you know. For Christmas, for one day, everybody seemed to just join in and thoroughly enjoy themselves.
And in subsequent years, of course, we carried on this tradition of thinking so much about Christmas. This was great. My granny was wrong.
On the eve of Britain's first peacetime Christmas for 6 years,
London crowds packed the pavements for those bits of shopping which always do get left until the last minute. Facing perhaps their most
The experience of the war had created a will to celebrate Christmas as never before.
In the toy factories, the wheels are turning again, and the old traditional atmosphere is back. Austerity
As industry turned from tanks to toys, the Christmas festival moved into a new era of affluence.
in the air, and we hope a gift or two in the stocking.
Many more people could afford to buy presents, and with more holiday time and pay, they were free to travel home for a true family Christmas.
When home is reached and parents and children reunited, the joy of Christmas is complete. The lights have everywhere been brighter, people happier, more to buy, more money to spend.
It was in the affluent years of the late 50s that the Victorian ideal of Christmas could finally be enjoyed by just about everybody. In the mid-50s, the last and most powerful modern means for promoting the Christmas festival was switched on. Television with advertising.
Tom Thumb cigars for Christmas.
In the age of television, Christmas became much more of a domestic family occasion than it had ever been. The triumph of the Victorian Christmas was complete.
Tom Thumb, the Christmas gift for men.
If he smokes, he'll enjoy Tom Thumb.
Just at this point, a new era in the history of the great national festival was launched. The very affluence which had made the traditional Christmas a possibility for all allowed more and more people to enjoy a new kind of celebration, very different in its rituals from Christmas past.
Union Castle liner Carnarvon Castle took on stores at Southampton, Christmas fare in generous quantity, as she and her passengers will be afloat on the 25th. DOAC will be giving lots of people their first Christmas at 40,000 feet over the Andes. Quite an experience. Among the very fortunate were Comet crews on the beach at Recife, Brazil. We're told we've never had it so good. If we have it still better, then maybe one day we'll sample a sizzling 25th on a tropical beach. Meanwhile, all the best to you all.